My dad didn't even say hello. He stepped out onto the driveway, looked around, and frowned. "Where's your car?" The question hit harder than it should have. I tightened my grip on my purse. "Daniel needed it," I said lightly. "His mom had an appointment." My dad's eyes didn't leave my face. "That's not what I asked." That car wasn't just a car. It was a promise. 3 years earlier, on the day I graduated nursing school, my dad had surprised me with it. Midnight blue, brand new. He handed me the keys and said, "So you'll never have to depend on anyone." I remember laughing and hugging him, thinking he was being dramatic. Now I understood. When I married Daniel, everything felt like a fairy tale. He was attentive, protective, responsible. His mother, Carol, lived alone and leaned heavily on him. He was her only son. "I just want a family that stays close," she had said during our engagement dinner. I thought that sounded sweet. I didn't realize close meant control. It started with small suggestions. "We don't need 2 cars," Daniel said one evening while reviewing our bills. "It's a waste of money." I hesitated, "But I use mine for work." "You work 4 days a week," he said calmly. "On your off days, it just sits there." Carol chimed in from the kitchen. "A married couple shares things, dear." I told myself they were right. 2 months later, Daniel brought paperwork home. "It's simpler if both vehicles are under my name," he said. "Insurance companies give better rates." I felt a flicker of discomfort, but then he sighed, "You don't trust me." And just like that, I signed. By month 6, I wasn't driving at all. If I needed to go somewhere, I had to ask. Where? How long? Is it necessary? The questions felt reasonable at first. Then they started to feel like permission slips. The night everything shattered, I came home early from a double shift. The garage was empty. I walked back inside slowly. "Daniel?" I called. He was at the kitchen table with Carol. "Oh," he said casually, "you're home." "Where's the car?" He didn't look guilty. "I sold it." My heart stopped. "You what?" "We needed money for Mom's medical bills," he said. "It made sense." "You didn't even tell me." "It was in my name," he replied. "It was my decision." Carol didn't say a word. She just sipped her tea. That night I checked our bank account. Savings, gone. Joint account, nearly empty. Credit cards, maxed. All under my name. My chest felt tight. I scrolled through the transactions. Transfers I never approved. Purchases I never made. Loans I never agreed to. I wasn't just losing a car, I was drowning. The next morning, I went to my parents' house. That's when my dad asked, "Where's your car?" And for the first time in a year, I told the truth. His jaw tightened as I explained everything. He didn't yell, he didn't storm off, he just said something that changed my life. "Go back, gather your documents, and come home." When I returned to the house, Daniel was waiting. "I talked to a lawyer today," he said calmly. My stomach dropped. And if you leave, you'll regret it." That was the moment I understood. This wasn't about money. This was about power. And I was done giving it away. The papers I was never supposed to see. I didn't respond to Daniel right away. "If I leave, I'll regret it," I repeated quietly. He leaned back in his chair like we were discussing the weather. "You're being emotional. You don't understand how these things work." "How what works?" "Marriage, assets, stability." His tone was patient, rehearsed. "If you walk out with nothing." Nothing. The word echoed in my head. Nothing, except the $18,000 in credit card debt I hadn't created. That night, I waited until they both went to bed. Then I opened the filing cabinet in Daniel's office. I had never looked through it before. I never felt the need to. Now, my hands trembled as I flipped through folders. Mortgage papers, insurance policies, loan agreements. And then I saw it. A personal loan application. Borrower name? Mine. Signature? Supposedly mine. Amount? $25,000. Approval date? 4 months ago. I stared at the signature. It looked almost like mine, but the R in my name curled differently. I always looped it. This one didn't. My stomach dropped. I kept digging. There were 3 more. 3, each between $10,000 and $30,000, all in my name, all electronically signed, all deposited into an account I didn't recognize. I pulled out my phone and took pictures of everything, every page, every number, every date. Something inside me had shifted. The fear was still there, but now it had teeth. The next morning, I didn't confront him. I went to work like normal. But instead of charting patient notes during my break, I called the bank. After 20 minutes on hold, a woman named Marissa picked up. "I'd like to verify a loan under my name," I said carefully. She asked security questions. I answered them. Then she paused. "Yes, I see 4 active personal loans. I never applied for them." Silence. "Ma'am, the applications were submitted from your home IP address." My chest tightened. "I didn't sign them." Another pause. "Then you need to file a fraud report immediately." Fraud. The word felt heavy, dangerous, final. If I filed it, there would be no going back. That evening, Carol cornered me in the kitchen. "You look pale," she said sweetly. "Are you feeling all right?" "I'm fine." She smiled thinly. "Daniel works very hard to provide. The least you can do is trust him." Trust. That word again. I do trust him. But now I was lying. That night, Daniel came home unusually cheerful. "Good news," he said, loosening his tie. "Mom's treatment is covered for the next 6 months." "That's great," I replied evenly. He kissed my forehead. "You see, I always handle things." Handle. Such a simple word for such a complicated crime. At 2 a.m., I couldn't sleep. I opened my laptop and searched, "Spouse forged loan in my name, what to do?" The results were terrifying. Fraud charges, criminal investigations, divorce complications, credit destruction, and one line that made my heart pound. "If you delay reporting identity theft, you may be held liable for the debt." Held liable for something I didn't do. The next morning, I drove, using Daniel's car, while he was in the shower. I didn't leave a note. I didn't text. I went straight to my parents' house. My dad opened the door. He didn't ask why I was there this time. He just stepped aside. I spread the papers across the dining table. My mother covered her mouth. My dad's face turned a shade I had never seen before. "That's forgery," he said quietly. "And fraud," my mom whispered. I felt small again, like I had failed somehow. "This is my fault. I signed things without reading. I trusted him." My dad looked at me sharply. "No," he said firmly. "Trust is not a crime." An hour later, we were sitting in a lawyer's office. For the first time in months, I felt something unfamiliar. Not fear, not sadness, clarity. The lawyer adjusted her glasses and reviewed the documents. "If these signatures aren't yours," she said calmly, "this is criminal." The room went silent. "Criminal?" I repeated. Yes, and if you don't act quickly, you could bury you in debt before you even realize it. When I returned home that afternoon, Daniel was waiting in the living room. He knew. I could see it in his eyes. "You went somewhere this morning," he said evenly. "Yes." "Where?" "To understand my finances." His jaw tightened. "You don't need outside opinions." "I do when my name is on 4 loans I never signed." The air shifted. For the first time, he didn't look calm. "Be very careful," he said quietly. "Is God a threat?" "It's advice." Carol appeared behind him like a shadow. "You're overreacting. Families solve things privately." I looked at both of them, and something inside me snapped into place. "No," I said softly. "Crimes are not family matters." Daniel stepped closer. "If you report this, you destroy everything." I held his gaze. "You already did." He didn't yell. He didn't beg. He just stared at me like I had betrayed him. And that's when I understood something terrifying. He truly believed I belonged to him. That night, I packed a small suitcase. Not dramatic, not loud, just enough. When I walked toward the door, Daniel spoke one last time. "If you walk out," he said quietly, "you will regret it." I paused. Then I answered, "I already regret staying." And I walked out. I didn't sleep the first night at my parents' house. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart jumped. Daniel called 7 times. I didn't answer. Then the messages started. "You're making a mistake. Call me before you ruin everything. You don't understand what you're doing." The last one came at 2:13 a.m. "If I go down, you go down with me." I stared at that message for a long time. Then I screenshotted it. The next morning, I went to the bank in person. The fraud department placed me in a small office with gray walls and a woman named Denise who spoke in a calm, practiced voice. "Tell me everything," she said. So I did. The loans, the forged signatures, the empty savings account, the threats. She didn't interrupt. When I finished, she folded her hands. "Mrs. Rahman, this qualifies as identity theft and financial fraud." Hearing it out loud made it real. "If you file this report," she continued, "the bank will freeze the accounts and open an investigation. Law enforcement may become involved." May. Not might. May. I swallowed hard. Do it. Within hours, the joint accounts were frozen, the credit cards were locked, the unknown account receiving the loan deposits was flagged. And just like that, the illusion of control Daniel had built started cracking. By noon, he was calling nonstop. This time, I answered. "What did you do?" he demanded. "I protected myself." "You froze everything." "Yes." "My mother's treatment." "Was paid with money stolen in my name?" Silence. Then his voice dropped. "You're exaggerating." "I filed a fraud report." The line went dead. That afternoon, something unexpected happened. The bank called me back. "Mrs. Rahman," Denise said, "we traced the loan transfers." My pulse quickened. "To where?" "To a private investment account." "Daniel's?" Pause. "No, it's under his mother's name." The room felt smaller. "Are you sure?" "Yes, the funds were consolidated and then partially withdrawn in cash over the last 3 months." Cash? My mind raced. Medical bills didn't require cash withdrawals. When I told my dad, his expression darkened. "That money wasn't for treatment," he said quietly. "But why?" I whispered. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. 2 days later, a police officer came to my parents' house. Daniel had reported me. Claim, I had accessed and frozen marital funds without consent. I almost laughed. Instead, I handed the officer the loan documents and the fraud case number. He studied them carefully. "Ma'am," he said finally, "you did the right thing." For the first time since this began, I felt validated. But Daniel wasn't finished. That evening, a courier delivered an envelope. Divorce papers. Grounds, abandonment, and financial recklessness. Financial recklessness. The irony almost choked me. My lawyer, Miss Alvarez, didn't look surprised. "She's trying to get ahead of the fraud charges," she explained. "If he paints you as unstable or irresponsible, he weakens your credibility." "So what do we do?" She smiled slightly. "We don't react emotionally. We respond strategically." A week later, the official investigation findings came in. The signatures on the loans? Confirmed forged. The IP address? Yes, from our home, but submitted from Daniel's laptop. The investment account? Used to purchase speculative real estate stocks, not medical bills, not treatment, risky investments. And they crashed. He hadn't stolen money for survival, he had gambled it. When confronted legally, Daniel finally requested a meeting. Neutral location, lawyers present. He walked in looking tired, but not defeated. "You could have talked to me," he said coldly. "I tried." "You embarrassed us." "You committed fraud." Carol sat beside him, unusually silent. Miss Alvarez slid a folder across the table. Evidence. Bank traces. Digital signatures. Withdrawal logs. Daniel's jaw tightened. "You're destroying our family over paperwork." I leaned forward. "You destroyed it when you forged my name." Then came the moment that changed everything. Miss Alvarez cleared her throat. "There's one more issue." She placed another document on the table. A life insurance policy. Policyholder? Me. Primary beneficiary? Daniel. Amount? $500,000. My blood ran cold. "I never signed this," I whispered. Daniel didn't look at me. He looked at his lawyer. "This is standard," his lawyer began carefully. "No," Miss Alvarez interrupted. "What's not standard is that the medical questionnaire indicates a pre-existing heart condition." I felt dizzy. "I don't have a heart condition." The room went silent. Daniel finally spoke. It was a clerical error. No one believed him. When we left that meeting, my hands were shaking. This wasn't just financial control anymore. This wasn't even just fraud. This was something darker, something calculated, something that made my father's original words echo in my mind. "So you'll never have to depend on anyone." That night, I blocked Daniel's number. I changed every password. I froze my credit permanently. And for the first time, I allowed myself to feel something other than fear. Anger. Pure, clarifying anger. He hadn't just taken my car. He hadn't just taken my money. He had tried to take my future. And now? Now it was war. Here is part 4, where the legal war begins and the truth starts unraveling faster than Daniel can control it. Part 4. The insurance policy wasn't the worst part. The official fraud charges were filed on a Tuesday morning. I didn't feel victorious. I felt numb. Detective Harris called just after 9 a.m. "We've reviewed the bank's findings," he said. "There's sufficient evidence to proceed with charges related to identity theft, forgery, and financial fraud." The words sounded clinical. Clean. Too clean for something that had nearly destroyed me. "Will he be arrested?" I asked. There will be a warrant issued for questioning, he replied. Given the amount involved, this is serious. Serious. It still didn't feel real. Daniel was picked up 2 days later. Not handcuffed on the front lawn, not dragged away dramatically, but escorted, formally, from his office building. And that's when the first crack appeared in his perfect image. Because Daniel worked at a mid-sized investment firm. Trust was their currency. Fraud was unforgivable. That evening, something unexpected happened. I received a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer. "Is this Amina?" a male voice asked. "Yes." "My name is Samir. I work with Daniel." My stomach tightened. "I shouldn't be calling, but I think you deserve to know something." I sat down slowly. "Know what?" "There were complaints." "About what?" "He's been moving client funds into short-term speculative accounts. Small amounts, just enough not to trigger audits." My pulse pounded in my ears. "That's illegal." "Yes." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because when news broke about his arrest, internal reviews started, and your name came up." My blood ran cold. "In what way?" "He listed you as co-manager on 2 Shell investment accounts." I couldn't breathe for a moment. "I never agreed to that." "I know," Samir said quietly. "The signatures look similar to what's being investigated now." Forgery. Again. When I told Ms. Alvarez, she didn't look surprised. "This is escalation," she said. "He's been operating like this for a while." "Using me?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because spouses are often overlooked in financial audits. It gives him plausible deniability." I felt sick. He hadn't just gambled my credit, he had used my identity as a shield. But then came the real twist. Detective Harris called again. "We reviewed the life insurance policy more closely," he said. "The heart condition listed on your file was submitted 3 months ago. I never had a medical exam. You didn't need one. The form was digitally certified." By Daniel. "And there's something else." My grip tightened on the phone. "The increase was from $500,000 to $1 million 2 weeks before you moved out." The room spun. "Why?" "Because a high-value payout requires justification. Financial strain, debt, marital stress, it can be framed as motive." Motive? For what? The implication hung heavy in the air. That night, I couldn't stop thinking. The forged loans, the emptied accounts, the fake medical condition, the increased life insurance. If I had stayed, if I had continued believing him, how far would he have gone? Then Carol did something no one expected. She called me. I almost ignored it, but curiosity won. "You've gone too far," she said without greeting. "Too far?" I repeated. "You've ruined Daniel's career." "He ruined it himself. You don't understand the pressure he's under." "What pressure?" Silence. Then, quietly, "He owes people." My stomach dropped. "What kind of people?" She hesitated. "Investors." "Legal ones?" Another silence. "He made promises," she whispered. "How much?" "I don't know." But the fear in her voice told me it was large, very large. Suddenly, the puzzle pieces shifted. The risky investments, the cash withdrawals, the urgency, the threats. He hadn't just been reckless, he had been desperate. And desperate men make dangerous decisions. The next day, Detective Harris confirmed it. "There's evidence Daniel borrowed privately,
outside regulated channels, high-interest, short-term capital. From who? Unregistered lenders. Loan sharks. My skin went cold. Am I in danger? I asked quietly. There was a pause. You were financially tied to him. That connection is dissolving, but we advise caution. Caution. That was an understatement. That evening, my father installed new security cameras at his house. He didn't say much. He just worked quietly. For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. Not fear for himself, fear for me. Meanwhile, Daniel was released on bond, and instead of staying quiet, he went public. He told friends I was unstable. He told colleagues I was vindictive. He told extended family I had fabricated everything. And then he did something even worse. He filed a civil suit claiming I had accessed and manipulated his work accounts. He was trying to drag me down with him. But he made one mistake. He underestimated documentation. Every call, every message, every bank transfer, every digital footprint. Ms. Alvarez leaned back in her chair after reviewing everything. He's cornered, she said calmly, and cornered people expose themselves. Expose what? She met my eyes. The full truth. 3 days later, federal investigators contacted Daniel's firm, not just local authorities, federal, because now it wasn't just marital fraud, it was potential securities fraud, and the amounts involved, far bigger than my loans. That night, I stood by the window of my small apartment. Silver car parked outside. Safe. Mine. And I realized something. This wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about accountability. He thought I would stay silent. He thought fear would keep me obedient. He thought I would choose reputation over truth. He was wrong. And then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered cautiously. A deep male voice spoke. You don't know me, but Daniel owes me money. My heartbeat stopped. He gave us your name. The line went silent.
The voice on the phone didn't repeat himself. He gave us your name. My throat went dry. I don't know what you're talking about. A soft chuckle came through the line. Not amused, not friendly. He said you manage the accounts now. That's not true. We'll figure that out. Click. The line went dead. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at my reflection in the dark window. My heart was beating so hard it felt like it might crack my ribs. Daniel had done it. He had pointed them at me. I called Detective Harris immediately. He didn't sound surprised. We were afraid of this, he admitted. If he's dealing with unregistered lenders, they won't care about court proceedings. What does that mean? I asked. It means they care about money. And if they think I have it, then we make sure they understand you don't. Within 2 hours, a patrol car was parked discreetly down the street from my apartment. My father insisted I come back to their house. I didn't argue. The next morning, the federal investigation became public. Daniel's firm released a statement distancing themselves from alleged individual misconduct. Alleged. But internally, accounts were frozen. Audits were expanding. Samir texted me one sentence. It's worse than we thought. By afternoon, news spread among extended family. My phone filled with messages, some supportive, some accusing. One from Daniel's aunt stood out. You should have handled this privately. Privately? Like forgery was a marital disagreement? Like identity theft was a family misunderstanding? Like $1 million life insurance policy with a fake heart condition was paperwork? Then Carol showed up, at my parents' house, unannounced. She looked smaller somehow, less polished, less certain. My father didn't let her inside at first. "I need to speak to her," she said quietly. Against his better judgment, he allowed it, but stayed in the room. Carol didn't waste time. He didn't mean for it to go this far. I stared at her. How far did he mean for it to go? Her lips trembled. He invested with the wrong people. When the market crashed, he couldn't repay them. They demanded collateral. Collateral, I repeated. He promised returns he couldn't deliver. And my name? My voice sharpened. She hesitated. They wanted reassurance. My stomach twisted. So he gave them me? She didn't answer. That was answer enough. "You knew," I whispered. Her silence confirmed it. "You knew he forged my signature. He said you agreed. You believed that?" She looked down at her hands. "He said you trusted him." Trust. That word again. "It wasn't medical bills, was it?" I pressed. Tears welled in her eyes. "No." The room went quiet. "The treatments were covered by insurance," she admitted softly. "The cash was for his debts." Everything inside me hardened. He had used his mother's health as emotional leverage, and she had allowed it. Before she left, Carol said something that chilled me. "They won't stop," she whispered. "Not until they're paid." "I won't get a cent from them," I replied firmly. She shook her head. "You don't understand how men like that work." "No," I said evenly, "but law enforcement does." That evening, Detective Harris confirmed what I already suspected. The lender who contacted you is linked to at least 2 open investigations, aggressive collection tactics. "Violent?" I asked. He paused. "In some cases." My father's jaw tightened. "We're not taking chances," he said. Security cameras were upgraded, doors reinforced, my movements limited. It felt surreal. 3 months ago, my biggest worry was balancing work shifts. Now I was discussing personal safety plans. Meanwhile, Daniel's situation worsened. Federal investigators uncovered unauthorized transfers from multiple client accounts. Not millions, but enough. Enough to end a career. Enough to trigger prison time. His lawyer requested another meeting. This time, the tone was different. Less arrogant, more urgent. When we met, Daniel looked exhausted. Dark circles under his eyes, suit wrinkled, confidence cracked. "You didn't have to involve the police," he muttered. "You involved criminals," I replied. He leaned forward. "They're pressuring me." "They called me." His eyes flickered. "I told them you had nothing to do with it. They said you gave my name." Silence. "Did you?" He looked away. That was all the confirmation I needed. "You put me in danger," I said quietly. "I was buying time. With my safety, I was going to fix it." "How?" My voice broke. "With another forged loan? Another fake illness?" His frustration exploded. "You don't understand the pressure I was under. And you don't understand what you've done." Then he said something that made the entire room freeze. "They said if I don't repay soon, someone gets hurt." The air felt heavy. "Is that a threat?" my lawyer asked sharply. He shook his head. "It's a warning." After the meeting, Ms. Alvarez pulled me aside. "This changes things," she said. "How?" "We're pushing for protective orders immediately, and we'll request that his bond conditions be modified." Meaning? He could lose his temporary freedom. That night, I lay awake again. But something was different. The fear was still there, but beneath it was clarity. This wasn't my mess. It never had been. He had built this house of lies. He had signed my name. He had taken the loans. He had gambled. He had escalated. And now the consequences were catching up. 2 days later, the court issued a protective order. Daniel was prohibited from contacting me directly. He was ordered to disclose all outstanding private debts, and federal investigators officially classified his case as potential securities fraud. The lender who called me? Identified, under surveillance. I thought maybe, just maybe, the worst was over, until my father's security camera pinged at 1:17 a.m., a car idling outside, engine running, lights off, watching.
The notification sound from the security app sliced through the silence. 1:17 a.m. Motion detected. My father was already awake before I even reached his room. He had that instinct, the kind that only comes from years of protecting something you love. We watched the screen together. A dark sedan sat across the street. Engine running. Headlights off. Not moving. Just watching. My stomach twisted. "Call it in," my dad said calmly. Within minutes, the patrol car that had been assigned to the area rolled past slowly. The sedan didn't move, didn't panic, didn't speed away. It simply pulled off, smooth and controlled, like it had finished its shift. That scared me more than anything. The next morning, Detective Harris didn't sugarcoat it. "They're applying pressure," he said. "Intimidation without direct contact." "So they can't be charged?" I asked. "Not yet." Yet. Then something else happened. Daniel violated the protective order. He didn't call. He didn't text. He showed up. At my hospital. I saw him standing near the staff parking lot when my shift ended. For a second, my body froze. Then anger replaced fear. He walked toward me like nothing had changed, like he hadn't forged my name, like he hadn't handed my identity to criminals, like he hadn't listed me on $1 million life insurance policy with a fake heart condition. "You shouldn't be here," I said evenly. "I just need 5 minutes. You're violating a court order. I'm trying to protect you." I actually laughed. "From who? The men you sent after me?" His jaw tightened. "You don't understand how desperate they are. And you don't understand how done I am." He lowered his voice. "They think you have access to funds. I don't. I know that, but they don't. So fix it." "I can't." The words hung there. "I can't," he repeated quietly. For the first time, I saw it. Not arrogance, not control. Fear. Real fear. Then he said something that changed everything. "There's more money missing than you know." My pulse spiked. What does that mean? It's not just loans. It's not just client accounts. "Daniel." He ran a hand through his hair. "I moved retirement funds." "Whose?" He didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was barely audible. "Yours." The world tilted. "My retirement account?" "Yes." "How?" "I had access." "How much?" Silence. "How much?" I repeated louder. 80,000. The number hit like a physical blow. $80,000. Years of overtime shifts, night duty, missed holidays, gone. I stepped back from him. "You emptied my future." "I was going to put it back." "When?" "When the investments rebounded." "You gambled my retirement." "I was trying to fix everything." "You were trying to fix your ego." That landed. He flinched. Security approached at that moment. Daniel stepped away. But before he left, he said one final thing. "They're coming in person next." And then he walked away. That evening, Detective Harris confirmed the retirement account transfers. They had been masked as portfolio reallocations, legal-looking, digital, calculated. "You were never just collateral," he said quietly. "You were capital." The words made my skin crawl. 2 nights later, it happened. The doorbell rang at 9:42 p.m. No one was expected. My father checked the camera. 2 men stood on the porch. Not aggressive, not loud, just waiting. Suits. Calm expressions. That was worse. "Don't open it," I whispered. But one of them looked directly at the camera and smiled slightly, like he knew we were watching. The doorbell rang again. My father called the police. The men didn't leave. They simply stood there, waiting. When officers arrived, the men showed ID, private financial recovery consultants. They claimed they were there to clarify outstanding liabilities. Liabilities? I had never borrowed from them. I had never signed anything. But Daniel had given them my name. After the police escorted them away, Detective Harris was blunt. "They're escalating visibility," he said, testing boundaries. "What does that mean for me?" "It means we tighten security and we move faster legally." "How much faster?" "Fast enough that Daniel loses leverage." The next court hearing came quickly. Daniel's bond conditions were modified. He was placed under stricter monitoring, travel restricted, financial disclosures demanded in full. And then, the biggest shift yet. Federal investigators uncovered something buried deep in the transfers. A secondary account, offshore, registered under a holding company, signed digitally by Daniel, but co-authorized, using my forged credentials. The amount inside? $312,000. My breath caught when Miss Alvarez told me. "He didn't just lose money," she said quietly. "He hid it. Hidden money. While claiming debt. While claiming desperation. While pointing criminals at me." Suddenly, everything changed. He wasn't drowning. He was maneuvering. And that made him far more dangerous. That night, as I lay in bed, I realized something chilling. If I had never checked those loan papers, if my dad had never asked, "Where's your car?" if I had stayed silent, I would still be legally tied to that offshore account, legally responsible, legally exposed. He hadn't just gambled my money. He had positioned me as his fallback, his shield, his exit plan. But now the investigators knew. Now the courts knew. Now the lenders knew he had hidden funds. And desperate men with hidden money attract the worst kind of attention. At 2:06 a.m., my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Different voice this time. Calm. Controlled. "We know about the offshore account," the man said. My heart pounded. "Tell Daniel time is up." Click. I didn't sleep after that call. "We know about the offshore account. Tell Daniel time is up." They weren't guessing anymore. They weren't fishing. They knew. And if they knew, it meant one thing. Daniel had lost control of the very people he was trying to outsmart. By morning, federal investigators moved fast. The offshore account, the one holding $312,000, was flagged, frozen, and placed under emergency review. Ms. Alvarez called me before I even finished my coffee. "They acted overnight," she said. "Once we tied your forged authorization to the account, they escalated it." "Is it seized?" I asked. "Temporarily frozen pending criminal review." "So he can't access it?" "Not unless he wants to add international fraud charges to his list." For the first time in weeks, I felt something dangerously close to relief. But it didn't last long. Daniel requested an emergency meeting. This time, he didn't come in confident. He came in angry. "You had no right," he snapped as soon as we sat down. "No right to what?" I replied calmly. "To expose that account." "You exposed it when you forged my authorization." He looked at his lawyer, then back at me. "That account was a backup." "For what? Prison?" His jaw clenched. "For repayment." "To criminals?" He didn't answer. Then something shocking happened. He turned on Carol. "This is your fault," he said suddenly. The room went still. She blinked at him, stunned. "My fault? You pressured me. You said we couldn't lose the house. You said I had to keep appearances." "I never told you to commit crimes," she whispered. "You didn't stop me." That was the first time I saw the illusion fully collapse. They weren't united anymore. They were unraveling.
Federal investigators soon uncovered email correspondence between Daniel and the unregistered lenders. One message stood out. If repayment becomes complicated, my wife controls additional liquid assets. Liquid assets. He had marketed me like inventory. The court hearing that week was explosive. Charges formally expanded. Identity theft, securities fraud, wire fraud, forgery, financial coercion. The prosecution presented digital evidence tying Daniel's laptop to every falsified signature. They presented transaction trails. They presented the offshore structure. And then, they presented the life insurance policy. The prosecutor stood tall as he addressed the judge. This policy was increased to $1 million shortly before the defendant's spouse initiated separation proceedings. The courtroom went quiet. And the medical declaration attached to the policy lists a heart condition that does not exist. My pulse thundered. The prosecutor continued. In addition, internal notes show the defendant contacted the insurance provider twice to confirm payout timelines under sudden medical events. A chill ran down my spine. Sudden medical events. Daniel shifted in his seat. For the first time, he looked small. His lawyer tried to argue clerical oversight, miscommunication, financial stress. But the evidence was too layered, too deliberate, too calculated. The judge denied any request to reduce bond. Instead, travel restrictions tightened further. Passports surrendered. Electronic monitoring expanded. Outside the courthouse, reporters had gathered. I hadn't expected that. Microphones, cameras, questions shouted over each other. Did you know about the offshore account? Were you involved in the investment schemes? Is it true there was $1 million life insurance policy? I froze for half a second. Then I remembered something. Silence had protected him. Truth would protect me. I was a victim of financial fraud, I said clearly, and I reported it. That was all. But it was enough. That night, something unexpected happened. One of the lenders was arrested. Not for Daniel's case specifically, but for unrelated financial extortion charges, which meant pressure was shifting upward, and desperate people under federal investigation tend to cooperate. Then came the confession. Not from Daniel. From Carol. She requested to speak to investigators privately, and what she revealed changed the entire narrative. Daniel hadn't just been borrowing. He had been leveraging insider knowledge from his firm, timing investments around confidential client strategies. If proven, it wasn't just fraud. It was insider trading. Federal prison territory. When I heard the news, I sat down slowly. This had gone far beyond me. Far beyond marriage. Far beyond debt. This was systemic, calculated, and criminal at levels I never imagined. But the most chilling development came later that evening. Detective Harris called. "The lenders you've been worried about," he said. "Yes, they're aware the offshore funds are frozen." My stomach tightened. And they believe you influenced that action. I didn't control it. Perception doesn't matter to them. Silence stretched between us. "Are they coming after me?" I asked quietly. "We don't believe so," he said carefully. "But they are very interested in Daniel right now." Interested. That wasn't comforting. 2 nights later, Daniel called his monitored line. The call was recorded. He sounded frantic. "They think she tipped them off." Carol's voice trembled. "Did she?" "I don't know." Then he said something that froze my blood. "If they can't reach me, they'll reach whoever they can." I stared at my phone long after Detective Harris played the recording for me. The threat wasn't direct, but it was clear. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. That evening, as I stood in my apartment, silver car parked outside, lights glowing softly in the lot, I realized something. Daniel was no longer the most dangerous person in this story. The men he owed, the ones who believed I had cost them $312,000, they didn't care about court dates. They didn't care about legal nuance. They cared about money, and someone had to pay. At 11:38 p.m., my security app buzzed again. Not a car this time. A figure, standing near my vehicle, not touching it, just looking, waiting.
The man standing near my car didn't try to hide. He wasn't hooded, wasn't pacing, wasn't vandalizing anything. He just stood there, hands in his coat pockets, looking at my silver sedan like he was evaluating it, or sending a message. My father saw him through the window before I could react. "Stay inside," he said firmly. Police were called again. This time, the man didn't wait to be escorted. He walked away calmly before the patrol car turned the corner, confident, unhurried. That confidence terrified me. The next morning, Detective Harris was blunt. "They're escalating psychological pressure," he said. "They think I cost them the offshore money. They think you triggered the freeze." "Can they hurt me?" I asked directly. He held my gaze. "Not without making their situation exponentially worse, but intimidation is cheaper than violence." Cheaper. I hated that word. By afternoon, something unexpected happened. Daniel requested a monitored call with me. Against my lawyer's advice, I agreed, only because it would be recorded. His voice sounded different, less sharp, more desperate. "They approached me," he said immediately. "The lenders?" "Yes." "What do they want?" "A deal." I felt my pulse quicken. "What kind of deal?" "They're willing to reduce the debt if the offshore funds are released before full federal seizure." "That's not up to me." "I know that." Silence. Then he said it. "They want you to sign a statement." "A statement saying what?" "That you authorized the transfers, that the offshore account was a joint investment strategy." My breath caught. "You want me to confess to a federal crime?" "It wouldn't be framed like that." "It is exactly that. They drop the private debt. I don't owe private debt. They don't see it that way." And then came the part that chilled me. "They said if this drags out, things get unpredictable." "There it is," I whispered. "The threat." He didn't deny it. "I won't sign anything," I said firmly. "You don't understand." "No, you don't understand. I will not go to prison for you." Silence. Then softer. "I was trying to protect us." "You were trying to protect yourself." The call ended. That evening, Miss Alvarez confirmed what we already suspected. "If you sign anything taking responsibility, even partially, it weakens the prosecution's case," she said. "It could shift criminal liability toward you." "So it's a trap." "Yes." "And they know it?" "Of course they do." Then the unexpected twist hit. One of the lenders, the same man arrested earlier in an unrelated extortion case, began cooperating with federal investigators. He provided transaction records, private messages, audio clips, and one recording stood out: Daniel negotiating, not from a place of fear, but calculation. "I have access to more funds through my wife," he had said. "She just doesn't know it yet." The timestamp? 2 weeks before I discovered the forged loans. My hands went cold when I heard it. He had planned to use me again before I ever left. Then came the arrest that changed everything. Federal agents raided Daniel's former office, not just for document seizure, but because internal audit trails confirmed he had altered client statements to delay detection. That elevated the charges again: obstruction, fraud escalation, possible insider trading. Prison time was no longer theoretical, it was probable. And when desperate men realize prison is probable, they bargain hard. 2 days later, Daniel's attorney requested a private negotiation with prosecutors. He was willing to cooperate, willing to name the lenders, willing to expose unregistered financial networks in exchange for reduced sentencing. He was flipping. But there was a problem. If he cooperated fully, he would expose the lenders. And if he exposed them, he would need protection. And anyone associated with him, potential leverage, including me. That night, Detective Harris didn't sugarcoat it. If Daniel turns state's evidence, his risk increases, which increases yours. So what do? You stay visible, you stay documented, and you don't move alone. I felt exhausted. Not scared, not panicked. Just tired. Tired of being attached to chaos I never created. Then something unexpected happened. Carol called again, but this time she was crying. "They're threatening him," she whispered. "Who?" "The lenders. They found out he's talking." "And?" "They said families pay for betrayal." Ice slid down my spine. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because they think you pushed him into cooperating."
Of course they did. Silence stretched between us. I never wanted this, she said quietly. I thought about the forged signatures, the lies, the manipulation, the fake illness, the policy increase. I did, I replied, and I meant it, because I wanted truth, no matter how ugly it was. Later that night, there was a knock at the door. Not aggressive, not pounding. 3 slow, deliberate taps. My father stiffened. Police were already on high alert. He checked the camera. No one visible. But on the ground, near the door, an envelope. We waited for officers to arrive before opening it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No signature, no logo, just 5 words typed in black ink. Release the funds. Final warning. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I did something I hadn't done since this started. I smiled, because this wasn't power anymore. This was desperation. They were losing leverage. Daniel was cooperating. The funds were frozen. The investigation was widening. They were cornered, and cornered predators make mistakes. The next morning, federal authorities placed Daniel into protective custody. Not prison yet, but isolated, for his safety, which meant one thing. The lenders no longer had direct access to him, which meant pressure would shift. Again, as I stood in my apartment that evening, staring at my reflection, I realized something profound. 3 months ago, I didn't even control my own car. Now, I controlled the narrative. I controlled the evidence. And I controlled my silence. Or my voice. And I chose my voice. At 10:14 p.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Different voice. Calmer. Colder. You've made this complicated, the man said. I didn't reply. He continued. There's another way to settle this. I finally spoke. I'm listening. And what he offered next changed everything.
I'm listening. The man on the phone didn't waste time. We don't need the full offshore amount, he said calmly. Just access. Access to what? To confirm it exists. To confirm it can move. It's frozen by federal authorities. That can change. How? Paperwork. There it was again. Paperwork. Forgery had started this nightmare, and now they wanted a different version of it. You want me to sign something, I said. Yes. A release? Temporary authorization, he corrected smoothly. You sign, funds move, debt clears, everyone walks away. Except me, I said quietly. You'd be free. No, I'd be indicted. What happens if I refuse? I asked. A pause. Then, you've already seen how pressure works. Click. I didn't wait this time. I called Detective Harris immediately. Within hours, federal agents were in my living room. I replayed the call from memory. They recorded my statement. Then one of the agents leaned forward. Next time he calls, keep him talking. My stomach tightened. You want me to engage? We want leverage. And if they escalate, we're already watching them. Watching. That meant they were close. Closer than I realized. The call came the next night. This time, I was ready. The recording app was running. Agents were listening live. You've had time to think, the man said. Yes, I replied calmly. And? I need assurances. Silence. Then a soft chuckle. What kind? That once I sign, I'm not liable. You won't be. That's not enough. You're not in a position to negotiate. Neither are you, I said quietly. The pause this time was longer. You think federal custody protects him? The man asked. I think it protects me. Another pause. Then he made his mistake. You'd be surprised how easily custody arrangements change. The agent across from me raised his hand. Keep him talking. Are you threatening a federal witness? I asked. No, he said quickly. I'm explaining reality. Reality. The call ended shortly after, but it was enough. Enough to tie intimidation directly to an active federal investigation. Enough to escalate charges. Enough to justify surveillance expansion. 3 days later, arrests were made. Not loud, not publicized immediately, but targeted. 2 financial intermediaries connected to the offshore channel. The net was tightening, and someone was talking. That someone was Daniel. Protective custody had done something unexpected. It had stripped him of leverage, stripped him of image, stripped him of control. And when Daniel lost control, he talked. He provided transaction routes,
Names, encrypted message logs, offshore contacts. He wasn't protecting the lenders anymore. He was protecting himself. But in doing so, he exposed something darker. The lenders weren't just aggressive collectors. They were running a shadow investment network. Unregistered, high-yield promises, short-term liquidity traps. Daniel hadn't just borrowed from them. He had helped funnel clients toward them, which meant this wasn't about a few desperate loans. It was organized financial crime. And then came Carol's final move. She tried to withdraw $40,000 in cash from a separate account, an account investigators hadn't publicly disclosed yet, but they were monitoring. The withdrawal attempt triggered an alert. When questioned, she claimed it was for legal expenses, but the timing was suspicious. Very suspicious. Because hours earlier, one of the arrested intermediaries had made a call from holding, and Carol's number appeared in the call log. She had been communicating with them, even after everything, even after the threats, even after knowing I was a target. When confronted, she broke. He said if Daniel cooperated fully, they would release certain private records. She sobbed. What records? Investigators asked. Silence. Then she whispered. Insurance documents. The room went cold. What about them? They weren't just increasing the policy. She admitted. They were asking about payout speed. How fast? An agent pressed. Within 30 days. I felt sick. They had discussed timelines, time frames, procedures, not just hypotheticals. The prosecution adjusted strategy immediately. What had been financial coercion now carried undertones of something far more sinister. Conspiracy. Intent. Potential premeditation. Daniel's cooperation suddenly looked less like redemption, and more like damage control. Meanwhile, public pressure mounted. Media outlets began connecting dots. Offshore fraud. Insurance irregularities. Unregistered lenders. Internal firm manipulation. Daniel's name was no longer whispered. It was broadcast, and every broadcast pushed him further into isolation. Then came the final twist of the week. The offshore account. It wasn't just frozen. Forensic tracing revealed that $87,000 had been scheduled for automated transfer the day after I left him. Destination. An account flagged in a jurisdiction known for anonymity. If I had stayed one more week, that money would have vanished. And legally, it would have carried my forged authorization, meaning I would have been tied to international laundering, not just domestic fraud. The realization hit like ice water. My leaving hadn't just protected me. It had disrupted a timeline, a plan, a sequence. That night I stood on my balcony, staring at the city lights. For the first time, the fear wasn't dominant. Awareness was. This had never been chaos. It had been structure. Calculated. Layered. Step by step. And when I stepped out of line, the structure cracked. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was Detective Harris. They're negotiating. The lenders. Yes. For what? For reduced charges in exchange for naming higher channels. Higher. There was someone above them, which meant Daniel hadn't been dealing with random predators. He had entered a system, and that system was unraveling. Before hanging up, the detective said something that stayed with me. You were supposed to be silent collateral, he said. Instead, you became the catalyst. I stared at the dark sky long after the call ended. 3 months ago, I didn't even question paperwork. Now I was dismantling a network. And just when I thought the momentum was finally shifting in my favor, Miss Alvarez called for a final update. Daniel had requested to speak to me directly. Not as a husband, not as an accused man, but as part of a plea negotiation. He wants your statement, she said carefully. For what? For sentencing mitigation. He wanted me to tell the court he never intended harm. He wanted my voice to soften his consequences. After everything, I looked at the silver car parked below. The car my father once said was about independence. And I realized something crystal clear. This wasn't about revenge. It was about truth. And truth doesn't bend for convenience. The hearing was scheduled. The lenders were negotiating. Carol was under scrutiny. Daniel was cornered. And I had a choice to make.
The courtroom was quieter than I expected. No media frenzy this time. No shouting reporters. Just polished wood, low murmurs, and the weight of consequences hanging in the air. Daniel sat at the defense table. Thinner, paler, smaller. For months, he had looked like a man trying to control fire. Now he looked like someone who finally understood he was burned. His attorney stood first. Your Honor, Mr. Rockman has cooperated extensively with federal authorities. His testimony has assisted in dismantling an unregistered lending and shadow investment network operating across state lines. True. He had talked. A lot. The lenders had flipped on bigger names. Arrests had multiplied. Accounts had been seized. The network was collapsing. But that didn't erase what he had done to me. Then came the part everyone was waiting for. Mrs. Rockman has agreed to make a statement. Every eye shifted. I stood slowly, not shaking, not crying, just steady. I looked at the judge first. Your Honor, I began, this case began with paperwork. A few heads tilted. Forged signatures, unauthorized loans, hidden accounts. On paper, it looked like numbers. I paused. But those numbers were my name, my credit, my future, my safety. Silence filled the room. I was listed on offshore accounts I didn't authorize. I was tied to a life insurance policy with a medical condition I don't have. I was marketed as financial leverage to men who use intimidation as a tool. Daniel's eyes dropped. I don't stand here asking for revenge, I continued. I stand here asking for accountability. I let that settle. He cooperated because he had no other option, not because he chose integrity. A ripple moved through the courtroom. And while his cooperation may reduce risk for others, it does not erase the calculated decisions that put me in danger. I inhaled slowly. Leniency should reflect truth, and the truth is this was not panic, it was planning. I stepped back. I trust the court to decide appropriately. Then I sat down. Daniel never looked at me again. The prosecution outlined the full scope. 4 forged personal loans, retirement account manipulation, client fund misdirection, offshore concealment, obstruction of audits, insurance irregularities, financial coercion. But they also acknowledged his cooperation. Without him, the larger network might have remained intact. When the judge finally spoke, the room seemed to hold its breath.
Daniel never looked at me again.
Six months after sentencing, I received a certified letter. Return address, a federal correctional facility. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. Inside was a single page in Daniel's handwriting. I'm filing an appeal. There's something you don't know. You were never the target. My pulse slowed instead of racing.
He was trying again. Control through confusion. Still, the line stayed with me. You were never the target. Then who was? 2 weeks later, Miss Alvarez called. He filed an appeal, she confirmed. Not unusual, but that's not why I'm calling. Then why? There's a sealed motion attached. My stomach tightened. What kind of motion? A claim that evidence was withheld during sentencing. Against who? The prosecution. That made no sense. What evidence? I asked. She hesitated. He's alleging there was a never-intended beneficiary on the life insurance policy. The room went very still. That's not possible, I whispered. The documents submitted in court listed him as primary. They did. But according to this motion, a secondary beneficiary was added 2 days before you left. I felt my breath shortened. Who? There was a pause. Your father. The world tilted. That's not real. It's in the filing. No, that doesn't make sense. Which is why we're verifying. My mind raced. Why would Daniel list my father? Leverage? Confusion? Or something worse? 3 days later, the confirmation came. The amendment had been submitted digitally, time-stamped. 2 days before I discovered the forged loans. Primary beneficiary, Daniel. Secondary beneficiary, my father. Amount? $1 million. My hand shook as I read the document. Why include my father? Why tie him financially to my death? And then it hit me. If something happened to me, Daniel would collect. If Daniel was under suspicion, funds could divert to the secondary beneficiary, creating distance, creating noise, creating complication. It wasn't generosity. It was insulation. A contingency plan. That night I drove alone for the first time in months. Windows down, air cold, mind racing. This story had layers I hadn't fully understood. Daniel didn't just plan for gain. He planned for fallout. Then something else surfaced. The federal task force contacted Ms. Alvarez directly. Daniel's appeal wasn't about reducing time. It was about reopening evidence. And reopening evidence meant re-examining financial trails, including transactions investigators had deprioritized once the lenders flipped. One of those transactions? A small transfer. $12,000. 3 weeks before I left. Destination? A private security consultant. Why would he hire private security? I asked. He didn't, the agent said quietly. The consultant specializes in staged liability scenarios. My chest tightened. What does that mean? It means arranging incidents that look accidental. The room went silent. Car accidents, medical emergencies, staged break-ins, insurance triggers. My heart pounded in my ears. The dark sedan with the lights off. The man watching my car. The pressure campaign. Was that all about money? Or was something else being tested? Then came the final blow. The consultant had a note attached to Daniel's file. Subject hesitant. Timeline dependent on medical confirmation. Medical confirmation. The fake heart condition. Sudden medical events. 30-day payout window. I felt cold all over. The forged loans were step 1. The offshore account was step 2. The insurance policy was step 3. The pressure from lenders? A complication. Not the plan. I met with Detective Harris again. You're saying, I said slowly, that before the lenders escalated, he was preparing something else. He didn't answer directly, but his silence was enough. Daniel's appeal hearing was scheduled. Not public. Closed session. But the implication was massive. If prosecutors had missed intent elements, charges could shift. From financial crimes to conspiracy. Possibly attempted fraud with bodily harm implications. The scale changed. Everything changed. The night before the hearing, I received another letter. Shorter this time. You misunderstood everything. I was protecting you from what they were planning. You leaving disrupted it. I stared at those words. Protecting me? From who? The lenders? Or himself? And then I noticed something small. The handwriting was rushed. Uneven. Like someone under stress. Or someone realizing the narrative was slipping away. The next morning, I stood outside the courthouse again. Not shaking. not crying, just steady. Because now I understood something clearly. This had never been about love, or pressure, or bad decisions. It had been about control layered with contingency. I was never collateral. I was a variable. And when I stopped cooperating with the equation, the system collapsed. Inside the courtroom, new evidence was presented. The private consultant, the insurance amendments, the payout inquiries, the staged scenario notes. Daniel's attorney argued misinterpretation, overreach, speculation. But the paper trail was heavy and deliberate. When Daniel finally spoke, it wasn't polished. It wasn't strategic. It was defensive. I never intended harm, he insisted. But intent isn't declared. It's demonstrated. And his documents demonstrated planning. The judge didn't overturn the sentence. He didn't reduce it. Instead, he referred the case for further review, which meant Daniel's cooperation agreement could be reconsidered. If new intent elements were proven, his deal could dissolve, and his sentence could increase. Outside, I felt something unfamiliar. Not anger, not relief. Closure was too simple a word. It was clarity, the kind that comes when all illusions burn away. That evening, my father stood beside my silver car again. He ran his hand across the roof gently. "You know," he said quietly, "I never bought you that car because I didn't trust men." I looked at him. "I bought it because I trusted you." I swallowed hard. And for the first time, I fully trusted myself. But as I unlocked the driver's door, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Blocked ID. I almost ignored it, but something told me not to. I answered. A calm female voice spoke. "You think Daniel was the architect?" My blood ran cold. "Who is this? You've only uncovered the surface." The line went silent.
The line had already gone dead, but her voice stayed in my head. "You think Daniel was the architect?" I didn't sleep that night. I replayed every detail from the past year. The pressure, the loans, the forged signatures, the staged fear. Daniel had been controlling, manipulative, strategic, but mastermind level? Something about that word didn't fit him. He was careful, but he wasn't brilliant. And the offshore structures, the layered shell accounts, the timed insurance amendments, those required expertise. The next morning, I called Detective Harris. "There's someone else," I told him. "Explain." I told him about the call. He didn't dismiss it. He didn't reassure me either. Instead, he said something that made my stomach tighten. "We've been reviewing communications tied to Daniel's financial transfers. And there's a recurring encrypted contact." My pulse quickened. "Who?" "We don't know the real identity yet, but the alias used in the digital signatures is consistent." "What alias?" He paused. "Helena." Helena, the calm female voice. It fit. Too perfectly. That afternoon, Miss Alvarez requested a deeper subpoena into Daniel's messaging apps. What surfaced wasn't romantic. It wasn't emotional. It was transactional. Helena didn't speak like a lover. She spoke like a strategist. Short messages, direct instructions. Increase pressure timeline. Move assets before escalation. Don't rely on single trigger event. Trigger event. My skin prickled. One message stood out. Sent 2 weeks before I left. "Daniel." She's hesitating. The lenders are getting impatient. Helena. Then escalate leverage. Emotional dependency works faster than fear. I felt sick. Emotional dependency. That wasn't just financial planning. That was behavioral engineering. 3 days later, they identified her. Not a socialite. Not a random investor. Her real name was attached to a consulting firm registered in Delaware. Corporate risk management. But that was the surface. Dig deeper, and you found something else. She had previously been under investigation, never charged, in connection with structured financial collapses involving life insurance arbitrage schemes. Translation: she identified vulnerable couples, engineered debt pressure, created controlled accident scenarios, collected payouts, disappeared. I sat in silence as the agent explained.
Daniel wasn't leading this, I said slowly. No, the agent replied. He was recruited. It made horrifying sense. Daniel always wanted to appear successful, respected, in control. Helena offered him leverage, a fast path to wealth. All he had to do was follow the blueprint. The blueprint was chillingly simple. Increase spouse's insurance coverage, secure debt leverage in her name, create controlled financial stress, stage high-risk scenario framed as accident or medical event, collect payout, shift blame to financial instability. And because Daniel had access to my digital signature, the forged loans were both leverage and camouflage. If I died, it would look like stress, poor financial management, overwork, not orchestration. I felt ice in my veins. The dark sedan, the stage surveillance, the private consultant. It wasn't improvisation. It was phase alignment. Then Detective Harris told me something worse. Helena has vanished. Vanished how? Firm dissolved. Accounts closed. Travel records show departure. To where? He looked at the file. No official return record. She was cleaning up. And Daniel's appeal. That wasn't about innocence. It was about distraction. Reopen evidence. Force procedural review. Create noise. Buy time. Then something unexpected happened. Daniel requested a meeting. With me. Specifically me. Miss Alvarez advised against it. Detective Harris warned me. But I agreed. Not alone. Not unprotected. But I needed to see his face. The present visitation room was sterile. Cold. Daniel looked thinner. Less confident. Less controlled. He didn't smile. You talked. He said quietly. Yes. You ruined everything. I saved myself. His jaw tightened. You don't understand what you interfered with. Then explain. He leaned forward. You were never supposed to get hurt. My voice stayed calm. That's comforting. It was calculated. That's worse. His eyes flickered. Anger mixed with something else. Fear. She promised it would be clean. He said. She. He hesitated. Then finally. Helena. He said her name like someone admitting believe in something dangerous. She said stress events happen naturally. He continued. People collapse under debt all the time. Accidents happen. And if they don't? I asked. She had solutions. Silence filled the space between us. You were willing to gamble my life. I asked. He looked down. It wasn't supposed to feel real. But it was real. Every moment of it. Then he said something that changed everything again. She didn't choose you. What? She targeted your father first. My heart stopped. What are you talking about? She researched him. Business history. Assets. Insurance patterns. My mind raced. She said families with strong patriarchal financial angers are easier to destabilize. Destabilize. Not just profit. Control systems. Break structures. You were leverage. Daniel said quietly. But not the end goal. I felt like the ground disappeared beneath me. What was the end goal? He swallowed. Your father's portfolio. It clicked. The insurance policy. The secondary beneficiary. The engineered chaos. If I died under financial strain, my father would step in. Liquidate assets. Cover debt. Reorganize holdings. Creating exposure. Openings. Investment manipulation windows. Helena wasn't targeting $1 million payout. She was targeting generational capital. I stood up. The guard signaled the end of visitation. As I walked away, we reviewed everything. Every account. Every holding. Every trust structure. Nothing obviously was compromised. But that didn't mean nothing was infiltrated. Helena operated in timing. Not visibility. Then the call came. Not from a block number. From an international line. I answered. Same calm voice. You finally understand the scale. My hands didn't shake this time. You failed. A soft laugh. No. Daniel failed. You disrupted sequence. You targeted my family. I identify inefficiencies in asset consolidation. You manipulate people. I optimize outcomes. You destroy lives. Silence. Then, you were never meant to survive the volatility stage. Cold. Precise. Unapologetic. Why call me? I asked. Professional courtesy. That's not an answer. You're resourceful. I miscalculated that. Where are you? A small pause. Somewhere you can't reach. The line went dead. But this time, I wasn't afraid. Because now the illusion was gone. Daniel wasn't the villain. He was the gateway. Helena was the architect. And she thought distance meant safety. What she didn't know. My father had connections. International ones. Financial regulatory ones. And once he understood what she ascended, he didn't just protect assets. He activated networks. Quietly. Strategically. Globally. And somewhere far away, Helena's carefully structured shell corporations began to freeze. Accounts flagged. Transactions delayed. Compliance audits triggered. Not publicly. Not loudly. But systematically. 2 weeks later, news broke in a small European financial journal. A consulting strategist under investigation for cross-border insurance arbitrage fraud. No name listed. But I knew. Because the alias. Helena. And this time, she wasn't disappearing. She was being hunted.
Helena didn't run. She repositioned. That's what people like her do. While regulators in Europe began freezing shell entities connected to her consulting firm, she was already 3 moves ahead, transferring residual funds through layered holding companies in Singapore, Cyprus, and Luxembourg. But this time, she wasn't invisible, because she underestimated one thing. She assumed my father would protect quietly. She didn't expect retaliation. My father didn't yell. He didn't threaten. He didn't panic. He called in favors. Not reckless ones, calculated ones. Former partners, compliance directors, private banking executives, men who owed him decades of trust. Within days, her liquidity channels began experiencing random compliance reviews. Transactions paused, verification requests multiplied, internal audits triggered across jurisdictions. Nothing illegal, nothing aggressive, just pressure, sustained, professional, relentless. Meanwhile, Daniel's position inside prison shifted. When news of the expanding investigation reached him, he requested another meeting with federal prosecutors. This time, he wasn't bargaining for a lighter sentence. He was bargaining for protection. Because if Helena believed he was talking, he wasn't just a liability. He was expendable. I received word through Miss Alvarez. He's offering full disclosure, she said. About what? Everything. Operational blueprints, recruitment tactics, target selection criteria. And something new, a list. The list wasn't long, but it was disturbing. 5 couples, high insurance coverage, recent debt exposure, strong parental financial backing. I stared at the names. 3 had already experienced accidental losses in the past 4 years. 2 were still alive. Helena wasn't experimenting, she was executing. Repeatedly. Daniel provided encrypted archives, chat logs, risk assessments, projected payout charts. He hadn't just participated, he'd studied it, he'd believed in it, until he realized he wasn't irreplaceable. And then something unexpected happened. One of the financial institutions flagged a dormant trust. Not Daniel's, not mine, my father's. A trust established 12 years ago, recently accessed, digitally, from an IP address routed through Estonia, 2 weeks before my forged loan applications. Helena hadn't just studied us, she had probed us, testing structural weaknesses, searching for entry points. The insurance policy wasn't the endgame, it was the distraction layer. If my death destabilized my father emotionally, decision fatigue, emergency asset movement, trust amendments under stress, that's where real money shifts happen. This wasn't greed,
This was engineered collapse. Then came the fracture inside the investigation. Detective Harris called me personally. His voice was tighter than usual. "We have a leak." My stomach dropped. What kind of leak? Someone tipped Helena about the compliance sweeps. How? We don't know yet. But I did, because timing matters, and Helena adjusted too fast. Within 48 hours of Daniel's cooperation request, 3 shell companies dissolved cleanly. Not frozen, not seized, dissolved. Funds relocated. There was someone inside, feeding her. The task force narrowed internal access logs. Only 7 people had clearance to see cross-border freeze requests. One of them had a brother employed at a private cybersecurity consultancy, a consultancy Helena had used before. The pattern was emerging. Not corruption for ideology, corruption for payment. When they confronted him, he denied everything. But digital breadcrumbs don't lie. Encrypted message fragments, crypto transfers, small amounts, repeated, careful, enough to matter. He folded within 36 hours, and what he revealed was chilling. Helena never met him. She never exposed herself. She used intermediaries, layered communication, dead-drop digital systems. She built insulation into every relationship, including Daniel, including the leak, including whoever came next. Which meant one thing: she was still operating, and she still believed she could reset. Then Daniel made his final move. He signed a full cooperation agreement revision, waived certain protections, agreed to testify internationally if required. Not out of morality, out of fear. Because Helena had stopped responding to him, and in her world, silence means replacement. 1 week later, Interpol issued a red notice. Not publicized heavily, but active. Her real name finally surfaced in official channels. Helena Markovich, financial strategist, cross-border arbitrage specialist, suspected architect in structured insurance collapse schemes. The news hit quietly, but effectively. Airports flagged her passport, private aviation routes monitored, banking corridors narrowed. Her freedom wasn't gone, but it was shrinking. Then she called me again. No fear in her voice, just curiosity. "You're persistent. You underestimated me." "No," she corrected calmly. "I misjudged your threshold." "You mean my survival instinct?" "I mean your father's influence." So she knew. Of course she knew. "You could walk away," she said. "From what?" "This isn't personal. It was when you selected my life as a trigger event." Silence. Then, "You were statistically viable." I closed my eyes. Not from fear, from clarity. "You made one mistake." "And what was that?" "You assumed I would break." A small exhale on the other end. "Everyone breaks under sustained pressure." "Not everyone." Then I said something she didn't expect. "I know about the contingency accounts in Malta." Silence. For the first time, silence. Because Daniel had talked, and prosecutors had cross-referenced, and one account hadn't been cleared in time. Small, forgotten, human error. The line disconnected, not calmly, abruptly. 2 days later, Maltese authorities froze the account. It wasn't massive, but it linked her personally. Not through shells, directly. That was the crack. The first real crack. 3 weeks later, she was detained during a financial conference in Vienna. Quietly. No dramatic arrest footage. No headlines. Just procedural custody. And for someone who built her empire on invisibility, that was the ultimate exposure. Daniel remained in prison. His cooperation extended his sentence review, but not his freedom. The corrupt insider was charged. The 2 surviving couples on Helena's list were warned, protected. And as for me, I stood once more in my parents' driveway, my silver car reflecting the afternoon light. My father beside me. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded, because the fear was gone. The illusion was gone. The manipulation was exposed. And for the first time since that day, he asked, "Where's your car?" I understood something deeper. Independence isn't about owning a vehicle. It's about recognizing when someone is trying to rewrite value, and refusing. But as I unlocked the door, my phone buzzed with a notification. Unknown email. No subject. Inside was a single line. Architects always leave apprentices. And attached, a new name.
You're still here? Good. Because architects rarely work alone. And when one falls, another steps forward. Part 14. The Last Architect. The attachment contained only a name. Adrian Keller. No explanation. No message body. Just the name. I didn't recognize it. But something about the precision of the email unsettled me. No threats. No drama. Just information. That meant intention. Within hours, the task force traced the email route. Layered servers. Rotating IP masks. Professional. But not Helena-level sophisticated. Sloppy by comparison. Which meant one of 2 things. Someone inexperienced, or someone sending it deliberately traceable. Adrian Keller wasn't a ghost. He was real. Mid-40s, dual citizenship. Background in actuarial analytics. Formerly employed by a global insurance risk modeling firm. Terminated 5 years ago. Reason? Policy structuring irregularities. Translation? He knew how to design insurance systems and how to exploit them. Helena didn't build the architecture alone. She engineered collapse. But someone had to calculate risk tolerance, statistical survivability windows, payout optimization curves. That wasn't emotional manipulation. That was math. Adrian was the math. Daniel had mentioned him once during revised testimony. Not by name, just a reference. She had a numbers guy. At the time, it seemed irrelevant. Now it wasn't. We learned something else quickly. Adrian hadn't disappeared after Helena's detention. He had withdrawn, gone silent. No recent travel, no large transfers, just stillness. And in operations like this, stillness isn't surrender. It's recalibration. Then the pattern shifted. One of the protected couples, the ones on Helena's list, reported something strange. Their insurance provider had sent a policy restructuring offer. Higher coverage, lower premium, fast approval. It looked legitimate. It wasn't. The actuarial modeling inside the proposal was custom built, precision targeted, stress point predictive. Exactly Adrian's specialty. Helena may have been detained, but the system she built? Still alive. And someone was testing continuity. We moved fast. Financial regulators flagged the proposal. The insurance company confirmed it hadn't issued it. It was spoofed. Cleanly. Professionally. But not invisibly. Because this time, we were looking. Digital forensic teams traced the modeling code embedded in the proposal's backend. It matched fragments found in Helena's archived materials. Modified slightly. Improved. Optimized. Adrian wasn't panicking. He was evolving. I asked Detective Harris something that had been sitting in my chest. Why send me the name? He didn't answer immediately. Because you're not reactive anymore, he said finally. You're strategic. Helena had targeted vulnerability. Adrian was targeting opportunity. But now, I wasn't vulnerable. And I wasn't uninformed. Then something happened no one expected. Adrian contacted me directly. Not anonymous. Not masked. A scheduled video call request. Subject line. Closure. The task force wanted to decline. To intercept. To arrest immediately. But I asked for something different. Let him talk. Because sometimes architects reveal themselves when they believe they're misunderstood. The call began on a neutral screen. Then his face appeared. Calm. Measured. Intelligent. You've disrupted a multi-year structure, he said without greeting. You built it on people's lives. We built it on probability. You call that a difference? He didn't flinch. No one was forced into anything. Risk is everywhere. We simply directed it. You engineered collapse. We optimized inevitable stress. His detachment was colder than Helena's. She believed in control. He believed in systems. Why send me your name? I asked. Because Helena underestimated behavioral variables. That's a poetic way to describe attempted murder. He ignored that. You shifted from subject to actor. That changed the model. So this is what? Professional curiosity? In a way. He leaned closer to the camera. You want to believe this ends with her arrest. It doesn't? Insurance markets are mathematical ecosystems. Remove one node. Another fills it. So you're the replacement? A small smile. I'm the correction. And then I understood. He wasn't rebuilding Helena's empire. He was refining it. Less emotional leverage. More algorithmic selection. Fewer moving parts. Cleaner exits.
No dependence on unstable partners like Daniel. You made a mistake, I said. His eyes sharpened slightly. What mistake? You contacted me. That wasn't a mistake. It was ego. Silence. Because ego is the one variable no model can fully suppress. The task force traced the call in real time. Adrian had routed through multiple encrypted relays. But he stayed online too long. Explaining, defending, justifying. And justification creates delay. Delay creates exposure. When authorities moved in, it wasn't dramatic. It was procedural. A quiet entry into a rented apartment in Prague. Laptop active, encrypted drives running. He didn't resist. He looked almost disappointed. In the forensic sweep that followed, something unexpected surfaced. A draft document. Title: Project Silverline. Inside, a case study. Me, my father, Daniel, Helena, every phase analyzed, every failure documented, every miscalculation corrected. We weren't just targets. We were research. And that was the moment it truly ended. Because once you become case study material, you've already lost control of the narrative. Adrian was extradited, charged, not just for conspiracy, but for systemic financial fraud across jurisdictions. Helena's trial moved forward. Daniel's cooperation locked his sentence permanently. The insider lake was sealed. The two protected couples relocated their assets safely. Months later, I stood once again beside my silver car. But this time it felt symbolic in a different way. Not independence from a husband. Not survival from manipulation. But clarity. Because I understood something deeper now. Control isn't loud. It's quiet. Layered. Mathematical. And the only way to defeat it is to refuse to play the role assigned to you. My father joined me outside. You good? He asked. I nodded. Yeah. He looked at the car. Where's your car? He teased gently. I smiled. Right here. But this time it wasn't about the vehicle. It was about the fact that no one was designing my life behind a screen anymore. No more architects. No more blueprints. Just choice. And that's the one variable no system can predict.